Tonight on Newsnight Scotland, yet another supposedly authoritative report on independence. This time the Scottish Government says Scotland is being held back by the Union. Their opponents say they've come up with nothing new. We'll be asking whether that's an entirely fair assessment. Good evening. The First Minister, Alex Salmond, has made his latest push for independence, saying Scotland could more than afford to be successful if it goes its own way. Today he launched a government paper outlining the nation's key economic strengths. As politicians at the moment seem to think associating themselves with industry is a way of connecting with what they call real people, he launched it in a bus factory. Mr Salmond said Scotland generated more tax per head than the rest of the UK for every one of the past 30 years. The Better Together campaign dismissed this case as flimsy. Andrew Black reports.
Another day, another press launch in a factory. Today, the First Minister and Deputy First Minister visited this bus manufacturer, seen as a Scottish success story, to spread the latest economic message about independence. It was the usual kind of PR event. Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon toured round the premises. As that was going on, the journalists milled about in the obligatory high-visibility get-up as they waited the speeches. But first, the company's enthusiastic Vice President started with a few words of introduction.
They have been dedicated all of their lives to repositioning Scotland on the political landscape. They're on a journey to create new opportunities and to globalise their business.
Then the First Minister took to the lectern with a familiar message that Scotland's doing all right, but could do better.
We have huge potential, but to realise that potential, we have to have more of the levers of economic power. But we've used the instruments of power in the economy that we have at the present moment to help this company develop. We've helped with the apprenticeship fund. We've helped with the innovation fund for new products. And just in the same way, with the limited powers we have at the present moment, we can help companies develop.
Today's comments were based on the Scottish Government's latest report outlining the nation's key economic strengths. Other than oil and banking, which have been the focus of much of the debate so far, it says the food and drink industry has seen rising exports and an annual turnover of more than £12 billion. It also points out the creative industries have an annual turnover of £4.8 billion, while life sciences employ more than 30,000 people. Back at the bus factory, a few members of the workforce got to put questions to the government.
Scotland seemed to have an open door approach to companies like Mercedes and Volvo. Can't we do more to protect Scottish-based companies?
We're no longer in a world where you can put up trade barriers and say, we're only going to take buses from our country. If we did that, of course, you wouldn't be selling buses to South America, to Australia, to New Zealand, to Hong Kong. We're in a world where you survive by the excellence of your product, as this company is doing.
I would welcome your views on where the Scottish Government stands in supporting manufacturing in a future Scotland.
We are very keen to look at the targeted ways in which we can give you further assistance. Manufacturing generally, though, is a big priority area for the Scottish economy.
One of the accusations levelled at both sides of this debate in the past has been a lack of information, and in that respect referendum papers have sometimes been a bit like buses. None for ages, and then two come along almost at once. Yesterday, Scottish Secretary Michael Moore launched a Treasury paper, not in a factory, delivering the latest warning that an independent Scotland could be a scary prospect. This time he said there could be significant difficulties providing protection for savers and pensioners.
Scottish financial services sell 90% of their products to the rest of the United Kingdom. We don't want to put a border between those who are selling and those who are buying. We can see with the whisky sector that they use the UK's platform around the world to promote one of Scotland's greatest exports, and we can see with renewable energy in the oil and gas sector that it's UK funding and UK tax arrangements that allow the record levels of investment which we enjoy. This is a best of both worlds arrangement which would be stupid to turn our back on.
So if you agree with the UK government in this debate, an independent Scotland runs the risk of cancelled or delayed services. Alex Salmond, though, wants to turn that argument on its head with his call for people to get on board for a journey to a more prosperous Scotland.
I'm joined now from Edinburgh by the SNP MMC Kenny Gibson, who's convener of the Finance Committee of the Scottish Parliament. Also in Edinburgh is the financier and think tank chairman Ben Thompson, who supports the Devo Plus campaign. And here in Glasgow, Labour's Scottish finance spokesman Ken McIntosh. Kenny Gibson, all this positivity is absolutely wonderful. All these lists of we've got this industry and that industry and it employs so many people. A lot of people look at least the beginning of your document and think, this all looks a bit fine, really. Why on earth would you want to leave the UK when things are going so well?
Well, because we can do a lot better. We're still in a country with almost 200,000 people unemployed. A quarter of our population live in poverty, and when we compare Scotland's position to, for example, some of the countries in Scandinavia that are doing a lot better than us, then it's quite clear that we haven't been able to reach our full potential under the Union.
Right. And the policies to make us like Scandinavia and make us more equal appear to amount to cutting taxes for big business.
Well, I think you're well aware that we are a progressive party, and where we do have an entrepreneurial spirit in the SNP. We're also very much in favour of social justice, and we do want to ensure that everyone in Scotland has got a fair shout, and that's why, for example, we've enacted progressive policies like abolishing tuition fees, for example. That's why we support universal services.
But you don't need independence to do that.
Well, but quite clearly we need the economic levers if we're going to generate the wealth that Scotland needs.
Could you give me from the document produced today, the only actual policy I could find in there of the SNP was cutting taxes for big business. Could you give me a single policy that's in that document that would do anything to reduce inequality in Scotland, for example?
Well, first of all,
an actual policy.
Well, what you're actually looking to do with this document actually is to look at the finances of the Scottish Parliament, of an independent Scotland. You're not actually, it's not a manifesto for Scotland post 2016.
All right, I'll tell you what, I'll make it much fairer. I won't tie you to the document. Could you give me any policy the SNP has that would do anything to reduce inequality in Scotland?
Well, to reduce inequality in Scotland, we want to tackle poverty. We want to have a much more equitable welfare system.
Give me one policy that you could not implement now, but you could under independence, that you have as an SNP policy that would do anything.
Well, for example, the most recent policy that's been acted is a bedroom tax. I mean, obviously, we feel that's inequitable. That's something we'd abolish with independence. It's an obvious one. Anything that's got to do with making pensions better, assisting people on welfare, improving support for our younger people, through better childcare provisions, things like child benefit. All these things are controlled by Westminster, as you well know. Unemployment benefits.
I'm still not detecting any policies, but we'll give you a chance to think about it.
Well, I mean, no. I think you're being unfair. I mean, in terms of the yes problem, it's not about the SNP trying to win an election. It's about trying to sell an idea and a vision of Scotland. That's what we're doing. We're not setting up a manifesto for an election. When you're fighting an election, you say, if we get elected, we'll do A, B, C, D, E, F. What we're actually doing is we're setting out what a vision of what an independent Scotland could be.
Don't take offence, I was just asking you to come up with some policies. Anyway, right, Ken McIntosh. They do raise in the document some very serious issues, like, for example, the dominance of London, which is becoming somewhat bizarrely more extreme as a result of the financial crash, rather than less extreme when you look at relative house prices. That's a fair issue to raise.
It is indeed, and I think the answer to that is devolution. I think that one of the things
but hang on, the question to you then would be if the SNP struggle to come up with any policies that would sort out, you know, for example, make Scotland more equal or more Scandinavian, it's reasonable for them to say, isn't it, what policies do you as Labour have to stop this increasing divergence between London and the rest of the UK?
That's a problem that's beset our economy for some time now, and which we've tried at different stages to tackle. And I
don't know of any attempt by you to tackle it.
Well, I think devolution by itself was an attempt to devolve power away from London. Devolution has worked.
I'm talking about the economic power of London.
Well, I think devolution has worked in terms of stimulating the Scottish economy. Since over the period of the Scottish Parliament, for example, from 1999 to now, GDP has risen faster than Scotland than it did across the rest of the UK. So, you know, you could say that's a good argument. There are lots of decisions that we could be taking, not just devolving power away from London, but actually devolving power within Scotland. If there's an argument about, for example, about inequality across our country, which is a genuine argument...
It's like with I'm not clear you've got any policies at all that would specifically address the increasing dominance of London and the South East in the British economy. And in that sense, the SNP have got a point, haven't they?
Well, I would suggest that most of the Labour Party's policies are addressing social inequality, and if there is regional inequality in Britain, then most of these policies will address that. If you just take one policy, well, let's take one policy for example, we would not have decreased the top rate of taxation. The huge number of top rate taxpayers live in London and the South East. That's where.
Right, it's a pretty tortured argument.
That's not tortured. Okay.
Ben Thompson, where do you stand? Do you sort of a plague on both their houses? I mean, presumably you think. I know you think a lot of the stuff the SNP proposed could be done without independence, but presumably you also think that the anti-independence parties aren't really coming up with much of an alternative.
I don't think they've come up with very much that's been clear. All of them have started to talk about having constitutions. In fact, only the Liberal Democrats have actually come up with any firm proposals, which is very similar to what we've been proposing for the last 5 years, which is that Scotland should remain part of the UK but have much greater devolved tax powers to match their spending powers.
Right. But by and large, you don't think the unionist parties are what, coming up with enough?
Well, I think they just haven't come up with a clear enough solution, and I don't think they have got together to say this is what we would propose under a no vote, so that people have the confidence to know that there is something
But you think it's reasonable for people to ask for that?
Yes, I do. I think if you're going to vote no, you want to know what the structure is that you're voting no for. So what we were proposing to them is that in voting no, you should know what that looks like, and we would propose that that should be much greater tax powers to match the revenue powers, because if you want to change Scotland and all parts of the UK, you've got to stop the over-centralisation by Westminster, where over 90% of our taxes are raised by Westminster and passed down to local government and to devolved government in the form of budgets. And budgets do not incentivise people to do the sensible things.
Your argument that most of what the SNP have said today could be done without independence, I'm not sure that makes much sense either. I mean, oil fund, for example, I'm not quite sure how you would do that without independence. If you don't have control of a welfare policy, I'm sure Kenny Gibson's going to come up with the welfare policies in a moment, but I'm not sure what policies you could have that would reduce inequality in Scotland unless you had control over welfare policy. So isn't it a bit blasé just to say, oh, we can do all that anyway?
Well, our proposals do include a large element of welfare being devolved further down to Scotland on things like unemployment benefit. Because if Scotland and local governments are responsible for getting people back into work, then they need all the tools, both welfare, tax and spend, to be able to deliver that. So that's exactly what we do propose. But we propose that under being as part of the UK, because things like defence and monetary policy and foreign affairs and regulation is much better done within the United Kingdom, where 70% of our trade is done.
Kenny Gibson, could you explain something to us? Can I just quote you something from today's document? It said, however, it should be noted that Scotland could not reasonably be expected to take on a share of the UK's liabilities if Westminster insists Scotland is not entitled to a share of the assets. Now, this is something we've heard before over the last few weeks from some people in the SNP. It's quite a new argument. What exactly is it supposed to mean?
Well, I think what we're basically saying is that we've got 8.4% of the UK's population. We're happy to take on that share of the liabilities, but we want a share of the assets as well. And I think what we want is a fair, equitable distribution post the independence
vote. They seem to be meaning something more than that. I mean, the suggestion has been, for example, if the British government doesn't agree to a formal currency union with an independent Scotland, that somehow or other Scotland wouldn't have to accept a share of the British national debt.
Well, that's correct. Why would we accept I mean, the whole point of the currency union obviously is not only to help Scotland but to help the UK with this balance of payments. It's an equitable solution. We feel it benefits all parts of the United Kingdom, and we think therefore that would be the best way forward.
But just to be clear, you don't believe it's up to the British government to decide whether it wants to be in a currency union with Scotland?
No, I mean, Mervyn King's on record as saying it's that it's the pound is Scotland's pound just as much as the rest of the UK's pound, and therefore we have as much right to it as anyone else. And I think, to be honest, this is all shadow boxing. I think we all know that if Scotland votes yes, we will actually retain the pound, and I don't think.
Yeah,
there's
but
any doubt
I was
about
just
that.
going to suggest that. I mean, Giles Osborne says he thinks it's unlikely, but for you to threaten that if the British government decided not to have a formal currency union, that you would somehow refuse to take on a share of the national debt, that would be fatal, would it not, to Scotland should it become independent? Because you would be looked on as a pariah country by the international financial market.
Well, first of all, I think you're getting ahead of yourself here, because I do think that the fact that UK government hasn't ruled out a sterling union means that they know that it's in their interest. I mean, you know, Alistair Darling, who leads the No campaign, has said it's the logical solution. So I think if there was a yes vote, there's no doubt that we would actually go down that road. So I think you're being just a wee bit too hypothetical in terms of your questioning there.
Fine, except the threat, if I can call it that, perhaps it's not meant as a threat, is in your own document.
Well, I mean, clearly, but we have a negotiating position, and I think it's important to set out, you know, what the ultimate sanction would be. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, everyone in this argument feels that sterling will ultimately be the currency for an independent Scotland.
Do you accept that? It's not unreasonable, is it? Why? I don't see why is the British government being so. I mean, I can see from a narrow political point of view why they're being like this, but it's not unreasonable, is it?
The thing that I found baffling about this, well, I found a lot of things baffling about this document, but on currency, we're already in a currency union. We're in a currency union where we have some control and democratic accountability, you know, over that currency, and why would we give that up for no control? That's what I don't understand. Yeah. Most of these arguments are arguments for devolution. That's the bizarre thing about this paper. They're talking about all the good things that would happen or have happened in Scotland. But they happened either as part of the UK or part of a devolved Scotland in the UK.
Yes, but the point I'm making is it not reasonable for the British government to say, look, of course we'd have a currency union of Scotland. We don't want Scotland to be independent, but we're not going to be bloody-minded about this. Whereas the attitude at the moment seems to be bloody-mindedness.
Well, I think it's difficult. I think the SNP would quite like to have an argument with the Tory government about currency. What we just don't know. We're speculating what will happen.
You mean Labour would have a different approach?
We don't know. We're speculating as to what the debate will be if the Yes campaign actually win the referendum.
It's entirely reasonable for you to say, look, as the Labour Party, if we were running the UK, we wouldn't like Scotland to be independent. But of course we would say we'd be prepared to negotiate a formal currency union. Why wouldn't we?
Well, it's hypothetical, but can I just give you the example? The Labour First Minister of Wales has already spoken up and said he would be against it. So within the Labour Party, there are certainly people who would object to it.
Ben Thompson, do you think there's a lot of posturing going on here which could be resolved into some sort of more sensible debate?
Well, the art of politics is to accentuate people's differences, and
yeah, but you're not a politician, so you don't have to say that.
No, exactly. And I think the trouble about just taking the currency union, for instance. I mean, if we're going to be part of a currency union, that means that the centre will set interest rates, it'll set money printing, it will determine regulation. And if that's the case, why not be part of the club as a full member rather than an associate member? So if independence has to come with monetary union and the same head of state and various other unions, why don't we just keep the union that we have but negotiate proper decentralisation through further devolution, which is what Devo Plus has been trying to do?
Which presumably you wouldn't be against doing, Kenny Gibbs. I mean, I know you want to win the vote, but you would not be against any of that, would you?
Well, I wouldn't be against any of that, but I mean, we do want control of Scotland's full economy. I mean, we want control of Scotland's oil, Scotland's gas, Scotland's whisky revenues. I mean, the Scottish Parliament's got fewer powers at the moment than the Parliaments of the Isle of Man, or indeed the States of Jersey. We want Scotland to be an equal nation in Europe, and we want to have the same powers as other independent nations. And I think that's perfectly reasonable, and we think with those powers, with those resources, we can make Scotland a much more prosperous country.
Right, but you would accept that what you're going to have to do is convince people, and I come back to where we started this conversation about what policies you're going to put forward, because people are going to have to be convinced, and you know, whatever the merits of the document you produced today. I mean, let me give you one example. You talk about there are some ideas in there about trying to make Scotland a more Scandinavian style country. You talk about tax incentives to get people back to work. You talk about the possibility of mandatory representation for workers on the boards of companies and mandatory representation for women on the boards of companies. I mean, are these things you're actually proposing, or are these just ideas that have been knocked about?
Well, I mean, you know, as I said earlier, the difficulty we have at the moment as a political party is that we're not putting forward a manifesto. If we were fighting a normal election like 2010, 2011, I could say these are the SNP policies, full stop. What we're trying to do here is put forward a vision of what an independent Scotland can be. But we're in a coalition in the Yes campaign with the Greens, Scottish Socialists, Labour for Independence and other groups who do not necessarily share SNP policy on this. So what we're looking what we're looking at here in producing this document is to show what Scotland can actually achieve with independence, but we're not basically saying we will do this, we will do that, because the SNP may not be the party which is in power after 2016.
Yeah, I think people understand that, but
election.
But it's you know, what you can say is, look, this is what our vision is, and this is what we would do.
Well, I think
as you know, a lot of your critics from within the independence movement are saying, look, we need a bit of detail. We need a bit of radicalism here. We need a campaign which says, look, this is what we do with an independent Scotland.
Indeed, and if this was an SNP campaign, it would be much clearer in that regard. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, look, Scotland is not the country. I mean, 20 years ago, people used to say an independent Scotland would be poorer than sub-Saharan Africa, and you couldn't see Coronation Street, and all this nonsense. Okay. We've moved on to now. People now accept Scotland as a viable economic state, and it's about what kind of vision we have.
Okay, we're out of time. One sentence.
I would say the only policy that was in there, apart from the cut in VAT and APD, was a cut in corporation tax. Now, what do we want? Do we want Scotland to be a brass-baked country that just attracts tax?
That's 3 sentences. Right, we're going to have to
tax
stop.
dodgers.
Thank you all very much indeed. Quickly at tomorrow's front pages, starting with The Scotsman. Salmon's pledged to slash corporation tax. This is about what we've just been talking about, and Alistair Darling apparently saying they couldn't do that in a currency union. And all the pictures in the front pages, by the way, are of the after effects of the tornado in Oklahoma. And there in the Scottish Daily Mail, you can see the seconds before it happened. Simple test to beat baby blues, it says. And the Telegraph, again a picture of Oklahoma. £2 million pension pot, NHS chief's reward for failure, it says. That's all we've got time for. I'll be back tomorrow. Good night.
Good evening. A largely dry night out there tonight. 1 or 2 showers can't be ruled out to take us into Wednesday morning, but most start the day dry. Varying amounts of cloud, bit of sunshine across northern and western areas, but a chilly start in Scotland. And with that chill, a strengthening wind, increasing risk of showers into the afternoon. Can't rule out 1 or 2 showers pushing through Northern Ireland, but still generally dry and bright here with sunny spells. But the showers through the day in Scotland, the northern half of Scotland in particular, become heavy with hail, thunder, some sleet and snow as well over the higher ground. And those winds will reach gale force as we go into Wednesday night. Much of central western England will be dry, but down these eastern counties there's always a bit more cloud throughout the day, and increasing risk into the afternoon of a few showers popping up. Very much hit and miss, most of you avoiding them, but where they do form they could be a little on the heavy side. Cool to eastern areas, a little bit warmer further west. Central southern parts of England and Wales could get 17, 18 Celsius, around average for the time of year, but in the strengthening northwest wind around some of these coasts it will feel a little bit cooler. And the trend is to cooler conditions, if not colder weather by the time we get to Thursday. This is the city forecast for some northern areas. You'll notice how temperatures drop away markedly. Showers become more frequent. Even across England and Wales, greater chance of getting wet on Thursday, and it will feel significantly colder. Winds will be touching gale force, if not winds gusting over 50 miles an hour across these eastern parts. These are where the showers will be the most frequent. A little bit dry and brighter at times further west, but for all, temperatures well below where they should be for the time of year, and we remain with that cold theme for the end of the week. But there's more details on the weather in the run-up to the bank holiday weekend on the website.